Evening, everybody. The idea of this evening is just to get together and to talk through some ideas as far as operating etiquette, offering maybe some ideas and some guidance really to new amateurs, people who have recently got their amateur license. So obviously I'm Mike, M0XMX.
Hi everyone, I'm Oscar, 2 Echo 1 Hotel Whiskey Echo.
I'm Nicola, I'm M7NYH and I got my licence in June this year.
Brilliant. Okay, and for the watchers, by the way, it's now the last couple of days of August. So that's not a long time, is it?
Probably had QSOs with 40 or 50 different people already.
Right, cool, excellent. Well, it's good to see that you're getting the experience on the air. And Robin?
Well, I'm basically the same. Took mine beginning of June, got my licence, got on the air, talked to lots of people. Unique call signs, probably about the same ballpark as Nicola, 50 or 60.
And what was your experiences before you got into the hobby? Had you already used radios previously?
Started using radios as a kid. I was a secret at one time and we did a bit of radio work there, not a lot.
Again, somebody who was a reservist back in the dark mists of time. Also had a lot of volunteering experience with St. John Ambulance, and obviously I'd worked events, been ambulance crew, and actually done a bit of control work with them. And also I'd done some NHS ambulance support. So picking up the microphone wasn't that much of a challenge. However, operating styles are very different.
Yeah, I guess, and that's a big part of this tonight. It's all very well and good taking the exam, passing the exam, going out, buying your first radio, and because we're all kind of social distancing at the moment and there's no clubs going, there's a lack in terms of mentoring and elmering, as the Americans call it. So very often it really relies on that new license holder going off up a hill and kind of finding his own feet and doing it himself. So the whole idea of tonight is really just to maybe give those new license holders a bit of a guiding hand and a bit of an arm around the shoulder so that maybe they're going out there a little bit better armed. I think the big value here of having you guys, rather than me just sitting here and presenting a PowerPoint, which I've done before, which has worked, but I think the big advantage of having you guys is that, you know, you can throw questions in and you can maybe give any experiences that you've had, you know, on your journey of amateur radio. So anyway, the title of the presentation is Operating Etiquette, Tips and Guidance for New Operators. And particularly, this really applies, well, it applies to all amateur radio, but typically it's mainly VHF and UHF because obviously there's subtle differences in the way that you call CQ and how you do it on HF. The biggest piece of advice that I can give to anybody coming into the hobby is to respect the tradition and the etiquette of amateur radio. And I think that's where a lot of the people that have been in the hobby for a long, long time kind of don't gel with the new licenses if they see that they're not respecting the tradition. And yeah, so that would be my number one point, respect the tradition. Know your band plan and know your licensing conditions, which you would expect that everybody does to a certain extent because they've just took a test on it. However, there's a lot of people out there that have maybe had their licenses for many, many years that probably aren't completely up to speed with what the new license conditions say and what the current band plans are. Also, I think a good bit of advice is learn your radio, know what your radio does and how to use it properly. I think another really, really key piece of operating is to listen. A lot of people that came into this hobby over the years have started out as shortwave listeners. So they may have done 2 or 3 years just listening and listening and listening. And I think now one of the things is a lot of people are coming into the hobby, literally pass the test, buy a radio, get on the air, and they're not necessarily conversant with how to string a whole conversation together because they haven't done that period of time of listening. The respect word comes out again. It's all about gaining respect from the fellow operators, and you gain that respect in a number of different ways. We've seen it. We saw it last weekend, Oscar, where it's important that if you want to come into an existing conversation, you need to do it in a certain kind of way. Waiting for the gaps is a good key. And also waiting for conversations to finish. I think also if we can give the new guys some help in terms of how to join a conversation as well, because it's not always going to be a case of calling CQ and somebody comes back to the call. It might be that there's a conversation that you want to join into. But equally, answering a CQ call and also making a CQ call are very, very important. So it's important to understand how you actually announce yourself properly and how you form a CQ call and how to operate in a professional way. How to give a signal report. It might sound really, really basic, but again, I've heard operators giving signal reports in the wrong way that have been on the air quite a few years. So again, it's the basics, getting the basics right. And last but not least, don't worry about getting it wrong. As I just said to you guys, nobody knows everything. And if you don't know, just ask. It's really, really important that you know your band plan for obvious reasons, because if you try and transmit outside of band, especially with radios that have been wide-banded, unlocked, literally you're breaking the law. So knowing your band plan is really important. I listened to a QSO the other day where a new M7 suggested that they QS wide to 145,750. Thankfully, he was talking to somebody that knew, and they steered him in the right direction. They didn't shout at him. They didn't laugh at him. They explained to him why he couldn't QSY up to that frequency. So now he knows. But it's an easy mistake to make.
The skilled operator talking to the new guy that got it wrong, he was correcting in the right fashion by explaining why. And I haven't come across anybody on air who's been short or shirty with me now. That might be because I'm perfect, but I very much doubt it.
I don't believe they do for M7s a starter pack. So once you get licensed, I could be wrong, but I don't believe they give you anything when you're newly licensed to say this is where you should go, this is what you should do. So I would probably encourage people a great source of material, which is available from the RSGB. I don't think you necessarily have to be a member. I think you can buy it without. The prefixes in here telling you about different countries, what they are. There's world maps in there of different countries, locator details, all the frequencies, propagation, interference, microwave, antennas. It's like an encyclopedia of everything you possibly would need to know. And it's all at your fingertips. You haven't got to go and download anything. It might even be available online, I'm not quite sure. But I would say anyone coming into the hobby, this is well worth whatever the cost of it is. I actually won this in a raffle, would you believe it? An amateur, a repeater, the Essex Repeater Group AGM. But yeah, I would say that is a good source of information of everything for someone who's just getting started. I'd highly recommend that. That helped me anyway.
Yeah, that's a good call, those. And also, obviously, recommended modes, which modes to use on which part of the frequencies. It's not right to be asking somebody to QSY to a portion of the band where people are doing CW and stuff like that. And also power limitations as well. Know your radio. And I think it's important that when you're actually a new operator, the last thing you want to be doing is fretting about, oh, I don't know how to turn the squelch up and down. Or I was actually talking or trying to talk to a station a few days ago that I could hear fine. He couldn't hear me because apparently he told me afterwards that he had it on VFOB. So he was transmitting on VFOA and he was receiving on VFOB and he couldn't hear me. You may have even seen the video I did about the 991 and why I hate it or love it or whatever. But the amount of times that with the 991, there isn't just a knob to turn where you can actually change frequency or channel on 2 meters. And the amount of QSOs that I've lost because I haven't managed to get to the frequency that we're going to talk on quick enough. But it's all about knowing your radio.
I had a bloomer today.
Yeah?
I had the dual, in the car, mobile, I had the dual VFO on 70 centimeters cooling channel, SU20, and then I was listening on 2 meters on VFO1 to a special event station at Kelvedon Hatch, secret nuclear bunker.
You've been drinking?
Yeah, I think I have, haven't I? Get my words out. But I went back to him, and you weren't coming back to me. And then someone else come back to me, and I thought, I didn't call them. And it was someone I knew on SU20 going, you're broadcasting on 70 centimetres, not 2 metres. And I did not messed around with the VFO. And I thought I was on the other one, and I'm calling out on 70, which was a bit embarrassing. So we all do it. And even I've got a bit of experience. So you just got to check things. Always check things before you click the transmit.
Yeah. And I think, there's other stuff as well, like, the narrow and wide settings. And mic gain as well. That's another one where people, I've heard people say to stations, you're really quiet. Can you turn your mic gain up? And they'll say, I don't know how. Or, the RF power is another one. If you go twiddling knobs that you don't know what they do, all of a sudden you're transmitting 100 watts when you should only be transmitting 10. Next one, which is about gaining respect from other operators. And I think the best way to do this is to listen to the way that other operators talk and kind of mirror the way that they talk back to them. Also, another one as well is when you start looking at Q codes. Now, don't worry, guys, there's no tests here. However, I reckon you two would probably score quite high, actually. There are probably 10 or so Q codes that, as an operator, you'll need to know. So I'm just going to run through this list very, very quickly. I don't need anybody to say whether they do know them or don't know them. But at the end of it, if you say, oh, that's really good, I didn't know that, but I've heard people say it. So obviously, QRZ is, we understand it as who's there, yeah? Who are you? That kind of thing. QSY, to change frequency. So QSY 1454450. QTH, location. QSO, a conversation. QSL, again, I think we all accept that means yes, but it can also have connotations about sending a confirmation of the QSO. QRM, QR Mexico, which is man-made noise, and QR November, which is natural noise. QSB, we know what that means, don't we, Oscar?
Yeah, we had that experience today in bundles.
I was going to say, you used that about 5 times in our over.
Very rarely do I use that one, but today it was very, very relevant.
Yeah. And I've got to be honest with you, I very rarely use QSB. But the way I remember QSB is the B is maybe the B could stand for butterfly. A butterfly fluttering, maybe, because it's all about fading atmospheric effects on an over. So I don't know, butterfly, there you go. That's how I remember it. QRT, when you're closing down or when you're stopping transmitting. QRV, when you're actually starting transmitting. So I will be QRV 145.450 at 6 o'clock. QRP, low power. QRO, high power. And at the end of the day, my advice again to new amateurs is if somebody says something that you don't understand, just ask. Was there anything new for you there, or did you already know all that?
QSB, when it was coming down, I was thinking, what's that? And then when I clicked on, you told Oscar, so yeah. Yeah, I use half of them.
I think it's important to at least have an understanding of what they mean, so that when somebody says it to you, you kind of know you can keep up with the conversation. And I think, personally, that's about it. I don't think there's any need to learn anymore. And I think you can't listen enough when it comes to radio. So listening to the way that others talk, before you transmit, listening is really, really important, because there's nothing worse, and probably nothing winds me up more than somebody walking over a conversation that you're having. That's probably my number one hate, to be honest.
Bad manners.
Yeah, you're right. It is bad manners. I did have an instance not so long ago where I was really, really, really trying hard to work this M7 station really hard. And somebody just came onto the frequency and started having a conversation over me. And even after I'd said the frequency's in use, they said, "Oh, sorry, I won't be a minute. We'll be quick." And again, this is something I experienced recently. I was on S20 and I was trying that same M7 station. I was trying really hard to get back to him, to tell him to go somewhere. And on this one particular occasion, I was calling him. And literally before I'd even unkeyed the microphone, another really, really strong station, very, very close to me, keyed up and called CQ. Now, there's no way on this earth that I would have ever heard any station replying to me. And the fact that that other station that keyed up was very, very loud, he would have known that I was calling CQ. So therefore, my advice on S20 is leave a big gap in between their last transmission and your first transmission. There's more than enough quiet time on S20 in most places. So therefore, you're never ever going to be jostling for airtime, I don't think.
Right.
So yeah, leaving gaps, I think, is very, very important on the calling frequency, but also in between overs, because it does give people the opportunity that want to come in, and also at the end of overs as well. So, you know, we're all supposed to be listening and listening and listening, but there are occasions when you want to come in and talk as well. So giving people that ability to join into conversation by leaving gaps, I think, is very, very, very important, I think.
Yeah, around where I am, we have this informal net that could be on any of the channels. We'll meet up on the calling channel and then go somewhere else, and you'll find it by scanning for them. They get all excited about their talking and you get no breaks, and it's really, really difficult to break in.
Yep.
So the technique is to find the guy that's running it, because somebody will float to the top to be unofficially leader of the net, if you like, and you wait until somebody you know is distant from him and you break in over the top, and all you say is break, and very next door that break station come in every single time. So they've got that off to a T. So it's the courage to do that the first time.
That's interesting that you should say that, yeah.
But the courage to say break at the right time, but to give them their due, despite their excitement, despite them all talking amongst themselves. The first time I said break, I've got break station, come back. And I introduced myself and I was welcomed to the fold. That's really worked up here. It really works.
It's interesting that they encourage you, their etiquette, their operating etiquette. So very often when I'm on with them, or even when I'm just listening to them, you know, every probably third or fourth QSO says, with a pause, just in case anybody wants to join us. And then the person who's picking up the microphone will probably wait anything up to 5 seconds before they transmit. I've got to be honest with you, when me personally, I hate it when somebody comes in and says break. I personally do. For the simple fact, your license conditions say that you're supposed to use your call sign. So literally, when you first transmit on a frequency, the thing that you're supposed to always say is your call sign.
Yeah.
So I personally, and I know a lot of people that I know, if somebody comes in and says break, then they won't hear them. And again, waiting for conversations to finish as well, I think is quite important. When we were up on the Peak District the other day, one of the things that I experienced was I was in the middle of talking to somebody, and somebody else just literally keyed straight over the top of him to call me. Yeah, waiting and listening is a big part of it, but then also obviously announcing yourself properly is also a big part of it.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, my bit of advice to any new operators is literally to wait for a gap. Even if you've got to wait 5 minutes, wait for a gap. Don't create a gap. And then all you've got to do is just say very, very quickly and precisely your call sign, and then wait. And if it's not answered, then keep waiting. And maybe you've got to wait for another 5 minutes. And if you want to join it that badly, then I think most people will wait. But the key is to listen. And I think the other thing to remember as well is, before you join the conversation, you've got to ask yourself the question, why do you want to join it?
You'll know through common sense when is the right time to join a conversation. And I don't necessarily think it's the M7s who have got the issues with the etiquette. I think it's license holders like me and you, Mike, who get into bad habits, unfortunately. I think that's more of the issue here. You know, I hear break all the time, and I didn't know that was not really the done thing. And I think the problem you've got is when you are listening, if you are unfortunate to listen to people doing it wrong, which we all occasionally do, you then, unless someone puts you straight on it, you start following that way of doing it, which is, you know, worrying. You've got to be careful that you don't pick up any bad habits.
You're quite right. And that's why we're doing this video, because the clubs are not going at the moment to help educate the people. So there you go.
I think repeaters are a great place for an M7 to start. When I first come back in, even as a 2E1, I didn't know anyone that well on simplex. And what I found was you struggle to get into sometimes a conversation, as we've been mentioning. Now, if you go on a repeater and call out, you've got a far bigger footprint possibly than, as you just said there, Nicola, a simplex. Now, you're getting out a lot further. There's more opportunity. There's more chance someone's going to come back. And what I find is if someone is having a conversation on a repeater, they naturally leave a longer gap because the repeater tone, or they're waiting for someone to come in because the repeater is obviously being used far more regularly. So I think if you are just coming into the hobby or you want to get into more conversations, a repeater is actually probably a friendlier place to start with.
Answering a CQ call. So again, wait, listen. Wait until you hear the station call either CQ or QRZ, okay? Don't just pounce when you hear the station saying goodbye to the previous person, because there's a really good chance that the person is still transmitting. I've had it again where people just jump straight in and say goodbye while I'm still actually listening to the other, jump straight in and say hello while the other station's saying goodbye. And I think, you know, another bit of advice is literally all you got to do is say your call sign once.
There's two of the guys I've talked to on at least 10 occasions on different summits and the same and repeat summits, and they both handle it very, very well. And they do a CQ initially on the calling channel and tell you where they're moving to work. So you move to that one before you reply to them, which is a good thing. And they were calling, they did the CQ, and then he asked for M7s, M6s, M5s, and NEGs. And as he worked down it, he was only listening to the first letters. So then some more M7s came in later, or some M6s came in later. So now I'll take M7s, now I'll take M6s again. And he worked his pilot very well. At the same time, he's trying to write his log as well, because he's trying to score some points. All right,
was he SOTA?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Brilliant, yeah.
Yeah.
If you're calling me, you would say M0XMX from M7 ABC, yeah? I've heard a number of people say, this is M7 ABC calling M0XMX. I'm not necessarily saying it's wrong, it's just not the accepted way of doing it.
From my background, the emergency services got so used to who you're calling from me that it's just hardwired in.
when I was a new call sign, and again, I didn't know, I had no idea. A guy not very far from me, very established amateur, very quietly had a word in my ear one day, you know, without sort of like ridiculing me or having a laugh. And he just said, just remember, put the word from, just put it in there. So if you can't put the word from in there, it doesn't work. So therefore, 2 Echo 1 Hotel Whiskey Echo from M0XMX. Yeah. And that's where the word DE is from.
And my reply would be Mike 0 X-ray Mike X-ray 2 Echo 1 Hotel Whiskey Echo receiving.
So call sign, signal report. So R is for readability, and it ranges from 0 to 5. And again, very, very few people ever go away from 5, even if it's a really bad signal. Signal strength goes all the way from 0 up to, I don't know, plus 60 dB over 9. And a signal report is not personal, so don't be offended. I'm just rattling through these. And I think it's also accepted that the way that people give call signs is simply, you are 3-2, or you are 3 and 2, or your signal report is 5-9 plus 20. So again, it doesn't have to be strung out any more than that. It can literally just be your 5 and 9. So the last slide simply says, don't worry if you get it wrong. Most amateurs are quite a helpful bunch. I think most of them are. And they will overlook most things, but you must respect their hobby. And you must try and operate within their boundaries. Try and be professional. And if you don't know, ask. So that's the last few things on the presentation. Have you got anything that you guys individually would like to add or bring up that we've covered or not covered?
I think we've covered a lot of it, and it's certainly covered most of what somebody that's not used to using a radio needs to know.
Do you reckon if you didn't have your knowledge and you came into amateur radio with just a couple of weeks under your belt, would you have watched that and thought that was really good?
Yeah.
Would you?
And it's, you know, because it's, if you don't have the understanding of how a conversation works, how a QSO works, even the stuff like which call sign comes first.
I think this is a good thing for someone who's a shortwave listener who wants to get in amateur radio to consider.
We just lost 50,000 viewers there, Oscar.
Well, because it's a network radio.
My sons have just gone straight through the floor.
No, but in all seriousness, I'm not saying this is an alternative, but when I started, and you don't need one of these, you can do it on your phone. Before I got my license back, a week before I got it back, I didn't know where to go and talk to people on amateur. So I ended up, and I stumbled into it on network radio, would you believe? Because I didn't need any equipment. I didn't need a license, even though I, had one previously. And who could I absorb knowledge and get knowledge off of without setup? And Zello offered the answer, and I was only on there for a week until I got my license back. But if you haven't got equipment, and if you don't want to trust yourself buying something because you're worried you might hit the mic, a great short-term solution just to get you going temporarily is network radio, because there's a big amount of licensed operators on there, and on certain Zello channels, they are run very tight like an amateur radio network. I've done that for Essex Hams with the M7s. I was doing a net once a week on there for people who couldn't, who were going through the foundation course, who wanted to get their confidence up. And that's the great thing. I encourage anyone, even if it's just for listening, download it on the phone. It doesn't cost you anything. And have a few QSOs on there and get comfortable. I think it's a great thing to get comfortable with.
Well, funnily enough, you might not know this, but that's where me and Oscar met. And I had my call sign, so I was on network radio because I just discovered network radio as an alternative when I was driving. And I met Oscar and we chatted over a prolonged period. And a couple of Christmases ago, we ran between us a Christmas Day net, 2 slots, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. just really giving people the opportunity that may not speak to anybody on Christmas Day, the opportunity to come in from anywhere in the world and just pass their respect and their regards. So that's how me and Oscar met. And there was another guy called Bruce. I don't know if you remember Bruce. He was with his daughter, Emily. They were on that Christmas Day net. And Oscar sent me a text message yesterday telling me that he'd just passed his intermediate. Sorry, Bruce sent me a text message.
Yeah, great.
So, and, you know, a lot of that has come out of network radios.
This is aimed at all those that have never picked up a microphone before, or all those where it's a long time since they picked a microphone up. Say what was said, get to know your license conditions, think of something to say, and pick up the microphone, squeeze it, and speak. Nobody's going to jump down your neck.
The key is activity, and the key to activity is picking up that microphone and just calling. Because the worst that's going to happen is, yeah, you might get a bit tongue-tied and you might get a bit nervous and you might end the QSO quicker. But at the end of the day, it's another QSO in your call book. I just want to wrap up by saying thank you very, very much for joining us. I really appreciate your time. And yeah, it's been really, really interesting having you guys of your varying different levels add some depth to this, really. So thank you very much, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah,
Definitely.
definitely.
Right, thanks very much, Mike. Thanks, Oscar.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, 73.
You take care. Stay in touch.
Yeah.
I'm in the club.
I'm in the club. There's only Oscar that's not in the club.
Oscar,
What club's this?
Don't tell him what club it is.
no,